International Day for the Protection of Children is observed in many countries as Children's Day on the 1st of June. It also coincides with Child Protection Week being marked in South Africa from today to the 7th of June. Now, during this period, our country will focus on its most fragile and its most vulnerable citizens. Despite our sophisticated legal framework, South Africa is still marked by high levels of violence against and exploitation of children. Save the Children South Africa is part of the world's largest independent development and rights-based organization for children represented in 120 nations worldwide. Dvya Naidoo is the Child Protection Program Manager at Save the Children. She joins us now from our Hatfield studios in Pretoria. Good afternoon, Dvya. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon.
Are we dealing with an epidemic of violence against children in our country, Dvya, or is this being alarmist for now? We just want to get a sense of the scale and magnitude of the problem currently.
We're not being alarmist. The problem with violence against children is really extensive in the country. It has been escalating over the years, and it's because there's a culture of acceptance of violence against children in the country.
Recently, we've had some rather harsh sentences handed down to perpetrators of crimes against children. Our courts certainly are coming to the party and helping us in this battle. How critical are such stringent sentences to deterring crimes of this nature, do you think?
Absolutely necessary. We need to have more firm court rulings. For far too long, what's been happening is too many perpetrators have got away with violence against children or with very light sentences. We need to have more harsh sentences against perpetrators so that they stop abusing children.
Some of the problems around tackling a problem of this nature is that it comes to the gaps or the weaknesses in our childcare and protection system that's actually exacerbating the problem, if you will. Can you just highlight some of those? You must come across that quite frequently in your line of work.
Yes, a few years ago, Save the Children South Africa commissioned research to look at what's the nature and extent of our legal framework to protect children. And what came off that quite clearly was that we have a very good legal system. So in terms of laws, we're largely compliant with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, both to which South Africa has signed both of these treaties. But what we found in the study that we undertook was that implementation was a major gap. And therefore, we continue to see so much of violence against children, because while we have good laws in place, the gaps are in implementation. One of the major concerns and causes of the gaps in implementation is the resource allocation. So not enough funding is put in to resource the needs in terms of children. So you have very shortage of social workers. There's a shortage of SAPs who deal with this issue specifically. And so therefore we don't have the balance between what the law promises and commits to and what resources we put against to make sure that those laws actually are realized.
All right, so from what I'm hearing you say, there is compliance with international laws and treaties and so forth, but there's implementation on the ground that's lacking. How do we, Dvya, start to close these gaps between perhaps child welfare, our protection laws, and actual service delivery? And why should there be more focus on early intervention?
Okay, there's just one gap I want to mention in terms of legislation. And that is with regard to banning of corporal punishment in the home. The home is the core, the one place where children should go to, should feel safe, and the gap in terms of legislation in that, because corporal punishment is allowed in the home. It's legally acceptable in terms of the defense of reasonable chastisement. So early intervention is important, but to go one step earlier, we need to also close that gap in terms of legislation. Early intervention is absolutely crucial, and therefore from Save the Children South Africa's side, what we're looking at is this year we've started to embark on a major program to focus on parents, where we teach parents skills so that they're better equipped to be parents. And that kind of early intervention will help to be able to prevent the issues of violence, because most of the violence occurring in the home and around the home are happening by parents.
Dvya, I want to quickly, we are running out of time, but I want to quickly talk about the inequitable access to health, education, social services, etc. We do know that poverty doesn't necessarily equate or mean violence, but it's true that our less affluent communities such as Diepsloot and Delft, which recently made headlines for violent crime against minors, they're also more susceptible to such violent crimes. Just quickly talk to us about this link between poverty, social services, unemployment and abuse.
You see, there's two components one must look at when you look at the issue around poverty. Firstly is that violence is not linked to poverty. But what happens is that the stresses of poverty make children more vulnerable, because in situations where families, there's high levels of unemployment, there's higher levels of stress, and therefore children become more vulnerable in the situation. So there's no direct link that because a family is poor, that they're actually going to be violence. The other issue is that it's about the recognition of violence. If you look at in poorer communities, one is able to recognize the violence because of the nature of the way the community is. Families live very close to each other, so if a child is screaming in one home, others will hear it. Whereas in more affluent communities, it does not mean that violence does not occur. It's just that we're not able to pick it up more easily. So therefore, you'd hear more in the media about communities where violence is picked up more easily, and that is usually in the communities where families live in close proximity to each other.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us on the SABC News Desk. Dvya Naidoo, she's the Child Protection Program Manager at Save the Children.